There was a comment rather than a question, and just really saying that the data centers, in order to try and support the IXPs, need to all make sure they're doing free cross connects inside, back to the IXPs. Charging for them is just going to really stop the market, not really how we're going further. So it's just really to, if you are looking at building a data center or you're getting data centers, please give free cross connects to the IXPs in the building.
So maybe just to add on that one, Ben, oh geez, feedback. So maybe just to add on that, from a Terraco perspective, we agree with you 100%. So like, for example, Joburg, Durban, Cape Town, wherever the IXP is based, we don't charge for the cross connects to that actual IXP. So we definitely do give those away.
Mike Silver, just a comment on the last presentation, having seen and heard much of what was discussed earlier before. I was very interested to hear some of the comments made about localization and the benefits of localization. One thing that I'd add, and I'd stress very much for this audience, is local payments, because payment in Africa is still often an issue. Not everybody has a credit card, and if you ask many of our colleagues from West Africa, even if you do happen to have a credit card, you'll often find that international hosting providers, or in fact any international gateway, will pick up the fact that your credit card is from West Africa and will block it, because there's a perception amongst certain communities that everybody from that area of the continent must be perpetrating fraud, so therefore your card won't work. Where the mobile operators have proved to be incredibly successful in Africa is by providing...
Could you speak a bit louder?
Sorry. Where the mobile operators have been incredibly successful in Africa has been in providing innovative and novel payment mechanisms. Firstly, moving the prepaid model and innovating the prepaid model beyond what was happening in the rest of the world, but then secondly, starting to look at mobile payments. And I would suggest that one of the key benefits of localization is actually getting not only support, but also the benefits of payments and appropriate payments in local currency, in particular in countries, many of which are still subject to exchange control and other foreign payment restrictions.
Thank you. This is an absolutely brilliant idea, and if you don't mind, I would like to add that into my presentation for further reference. I didn't think of it, but it's actually rather obvious. I wasn't able to walk to any ATM here in Lusaka, put in my card and actually withdraw some money. It didn't work yet. So that's a very good point. Thank you.
Ben, je vais essayer de parler en français, parce que mon anglais n'est pas trop terrible. Donc, je suis Serge Abelongani. Je travaille pour le régulateur Congo-Brazzaville. Nous venons de mettre en place depuis le 10, on a lancé notre premier point d'échange Internet le 10 mai. Alors, j'ai quelques questions à vous poser, et bien entendu, et les difficultés que nous, on a rencontrées. Alors, comment pouvons-nous quantifier le trafic local sans la mise en place du point d'échange pour déterminer un réel intérêt aux opérateurs? Parce qu'on était confronté à ce problème. On a 10 acteurs, mais pour le moment, il n'y a que 6 qui sont connectés parce que les 4 autres ne trouvaient pas un réel intérêt de se connecter sur les points d'échange. Ça, c'est la première question. La deuxième, comment pouvons-nous identifier les impacts économiques sur le point d'échange Internet? La troisième, quels sont les indicateurs pertinents qui montrent le bon fonctionnement du point d'échange? Et en dernier, quelle est la position des OTT, c'est-à-dire over the top, les fournisseurs de contenu, dans un point d'échange, et bien entendu l'aspect réglementaire?
Okay, thank you for the questions. Frank, you want to take a hit? Okay.
Take the first one.
Okay, take the first one.
So The first question was how can we measure the traffic, the local traffic that may be exchanged locally without starting building the exchange itself. So one of the means can be done via measurements. In fact, of course, it depends of the capability of your equipment. But today, even some cheap equipment can run stats like S-flow, net flow, stuff like that, so that you can measure how much traffic you have to a specific AS or to a specific block of IP address. And in that case, even if you are not connected yet to an exchange, you are able to see who are the players locally connected or that may be connected to the exchange, identify them, and then see through your IP transit how much traffic you exchange with them. And it makes you, at least, it brings you an idea of how much traffic you may catch through such players if they were connected to the exchange. So this is one way to do it. There are many other ways, but this is a pretty simple way to run it.
Okay, so how's it? So I'm going to basically answer the one on the content one, and probably my colleague next to me, Nichelle, would want to obviously add into that. But I think what we've seen from a Terica point of view and bringing large content players into a particular environment is a key thing is easy distribution of their content. So there needs to be a easily accessible IXP with a limited amount of barriers for entry. The next thing that needs to actually happen is it needs to be in a neutral facility. Because if you think about a content player or a typical content player, like let's say a Google, for example, they want to be able to connect with as minimal resistance at a low cost to do a mass distribution of their physical content. So a lot of these guys will generally pay for the hardware to come into the country, and there would need to be probably a bandwidth donation back to them, or alternatively, obviously an IXP that's operating as well, to be able to work as a community to operate that bandwidth back to them. So that's kind of the key aspects that I've seen around content and bringing the content providers into a country.
Do you want to ask a question or answer?
Answer.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to answer in French since it was asked in French. En fait, on arrive un peu dans le modèle de la poule et l'œuf. Quand on monte à un point d'échange, on va avoir les fournisseurs d'accès qui vont venir et on dit, mais tant qu'il n'y a pas les fournisseurs de contenu, on n'a pas d'intérêt à venir. Et les fournisseurs de contenu vont dire, mais s'il n'y a pas assez de fournisseurs d'accès, on ne va pas venir. À un moment, il faut démarrer, quelle que soit la chose. C'est sûr qu'au départ, le trafic va être relativement faible sur le point d'échange. Maintenant, quand on voit le prix de la bande passante dans de nombreux pays d'Afrique, notamment des pays où il n'y a que du VSAT encore, même si on économise 1 mégabit de VSAT, c'est un coût énorme d'économiser tous les mois. Donc ça permet de déjà inciter les gens à venir. Ensuite, il faut, on en a assez parlé hier ou ce matin, développer du contenu en langue locale. Au Congo, développer du contenu en Lingala, héberger au Congo, attira les opérateurs locaux, les hébergeurs de contenu et les ISP. Il faut arriver à développer cet écosystème qui ramènera du contenu local et les ISP locales pour réduire les coûts et faire des points d'échange ayant du succès en Afrique.
Thank you. Okay, so there's still two other questions that were asked. So the other question was on economic impact. How do you measure the economic impact? And you cannot measure the economic impact from day one of setting up the exchange unless there was a huge pent-up demand. But the way you measure the economic impact is the traffic, aggregate traffic exchanged at the exchange point. So you can look at the aggregate traffic exchange at your exchange point and assume that if that exchange point did not exist, that traffic will still need to be exchanged. And the only way it would have to be exchanged will be through the international transit. So that means you can look at the cost per megabit of sending the traffic through the international circuit and then look at how much traffic is being exchanged locally And if you calculate, you will find that that is the monthly, using the monthly cost of sending 1 megabit across international circuits. And let's assume your exchange point is exchanging about 10 megabits per second. So you can multiply 10 megabits times the price of 1 megabit international, and that will give you a fair average cost saving. It's a saving. And the way you look at it is that this saving means that the ISPs have that much more to sell to their to other users, because the traffic is going to be exchanged locally, and so they have extra international capacity. So they take longer to upgrade their circuits. So it's a cost saving for them, because if they needed to upgrade, they would have had to upgrade now, but they're having to postpone that upgrade maybe by 3 or 4 months. So that translates into cost saving to the service providers. Now, of course, at the start, and you said you come from the regulator, I know you want to see that translate into a cost saving that goes back to the end user immediately. Well, it may not necessarily happen immediately, because the service providers will now take that cost and maybe reinvest it back in the business, right? Grow their network and so on and so forth. So you are likely to see that it will be a couple of years before you actually see the actual prices drop. But if there is significant growth of the IX within a very short period, you will start seeing like what we saw in South Africa, where there's local traffic and international traffic. They had that model for a long time, where you can actually just buy local access only, and it gives you access to content which is hosted in the country, which was much cheaper than buying as a connection that includes international connectivity. So a lot of that will come over time. So you said you launched on 10th of May, so you're just about your first month anniversary. So it will take a while before it grows. And as you say, there are many operators that are yet to join. Again, as it was mentioned, it's a chicken and egg situation. Sometimes you build a road even if you don't know how many cars are going to come. You know there's going to be traffic, but immediately the road is built, many more people will buy cars and start using the road. So similarly, you will, once the IXP is operational, and people will start seeing the benefit, and even those who are most resistant will join it over a certain period of time. But so the key point here is, how do we grow the exchange point to attract more users? And I think that's a question that a number of the exchange point operators here in this room can help answer.
Can I comment on this quickly?
Okay.
I couldn't put it better than Michuki said. I just wanted to also mention that an exchange point attracts international cache services like Google Cache. Once they deploy it to the exchange, then a YouTube movie would then serve locally and no longer use international bandwidth. So what is the advantage for the end user, which is important to the regulator? They get a better service. I mean, they probably subscribe for let's say a 2 megabit DSL line for a certain amount, but this line is less overbooked, and they get a better performance when an exchange is in place with for example, Google Cache. So this is a point which cannot be counted in dollars or local currency, but it's also important from a user perspective, because they get more for their money they spend.
Bill?
Just a very slight amendment to what Michuki said. The economic impact is 2 times the difference between the cost of transit and the cost of participation in the exchange. So there are exchanges that charge money to participate, and so that has to be subtracted from the cost of transit before you do the calculation. And actually, it's a little bit more complicated than 2 times, right? So if 100% of the participants in the exchange were domestic, then, if 100% of the participants in the exchange were domestic, then you would need to count both the sending and receiving cost of transit that's being supplanted, right? If half of the participants were domestic and half were international, new participants, then you would not be multiplying by 2, right? So 2 times the portion that are domestic times the difference between the domestic and the transit and the IX participation cost.
Okay, I'm Frank. It's on. I would like to add that in the case of an IXP that is starting up and not all the ISPs are connected yet, I believe regulators and government in general can make a contribution by choosing very wisely where they want to buy services from, because they don't want their emails going over long satellite links to another institution, so they can make their choices and influence other ISPs to join.
Yes, as you come to the mic, I see the KXP is also here, and one of the questions you had is content. Because you're from government, I have something to throw back at you. Government is one of the largest potential content creators or generators, for that matter, with e-government services. I think Fiona there can also just take the mic and talk about the impact that she has seen in Kenya with respect to having government content going online in terms of government services, that is, and the impact that has brought to the exchange point, because I'm not stealing the words from her, it was actually a game changer in Kenya, because the moment the government went peering at the exchange point, even those who didn't want to join the exchange point had to join, but she can give more details on that.
Thanks for picking me out. Now, my name is Fiona Songa. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Telecommunication Service Providers Association of Kenya. Closer. Can you hear me now? My name is Fiona Asonga. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Telecommunication Service Providers Association of Kenya that runs and manages the Kenya Internet Exchange Point. What I have to say is that prior to the government services, any government services coming into the exchange point, we had 8 operators. And then in 2004, the Kenya Revenue Authority requested to, actually 2003, the Kenya Revenue Authority requested to come in and join the exchange point because they had an application that they wanted to use with the clearing agents. And being aware that the clearing agents were served by different service providers, they thought the best place to have that homed was the exchange point. And so they approached the exchange point and they brought in their services to the exchange point. And that did not only help increase the levels of traffic for the respective ISPs, but it had an impact on the overall aggregate traffic being handled through the exchange point. And what we saw was after KRA coming in, there was a speedy increase of other service providers coming into the exchange point. Then in 2010, the Kenya Revenue Authority again introduced another online service, which is the Integrated Tax Management System that serves individual and corporate tax requirements. And that was now the game changer, because their system integrates with the registrar of companies, registrar of persons, and so all that data being handled locally is running through the exchange point, and that has driven up the traffic levels significantly. And then what has happened also is that KRA requested for a particular requirement for anybody wanting to give services to government, that you should have traffic coming into the exchange point. So in the procurement requirements for any government institution, they must be peering at the exchange point for them to be able to offer internet services to any government entity anywhere in the country. And that has been driven largely by the Kenya Revenue Authority. And then in 2010, the government, through the government services, the e-government services, through their IT service handler came into the exchange point directly, and so now we have e-government services being homed at the exchange point and the traffic being handled through the exchange point. And KRA is now on a push to get all the banks that they work with to also appear at the exchange point. And from that, we have seen that there's a lot of value when you have a government institution appreciating the value of the exchange point and making use of it. And then everyone else begins to see the value, and it has seen our traffic increase every year at a minimum of 150% growth levels. And sometimes we surpass that to up to 600% growth. So there's a lot of value in being able to get all these government institutions into the exchange points. And if you're a government institution sitting here, please help your exchange point and support it by letting that group of operators do what they do best as the technical community, and just send in your content to the exchange point. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Kudia?
Thank you, Michuki. My name is Khoudia. I'm from Senegal. I work at the University Cheikh Anta Diop of Dakar, but I'm going to speak in French to explain more better my idea. J'ai eu à travailler dans la commission de mise en place du point d'échange au Sénégal dans le cadre du projet AXIS, piloté par ISOC. Et dans cette commission-là, nous étions confrontés à un problème. On devait réfléchir en fait sur la pertinence d'un point d'échange au Sénégal. Pertinence du point de vue technique, du point de vue finance et du point de vue juridique. Mais pour le cas du Sénégal, c'est un peu particulier parce que nous vivons en fait dans un pays où on a le monopole. Même si on dit qu'il y a d'autres ASP, tous les ASP passent par le réseau de la Sonatel, qui est l'opérateur historique. Et aujourd'hui, la mise en place d'un point d'échange au Sénégal est bloquée à ce niveau-là. Si l'opérateur historique Sonatel n'y adhère pas, je vois mal comment nous, en tant qu'universitaires et le gouvernement, avec l'agence de la direction informatique de l'État, nous seuls, au niveau d'un point d'échange, est-ce que c'est pertinent? Donc, qu'est-ce que AFPIF peut faire? Qu'est-ce que l'AFRINIC peut faire pour sensibiliser l'opérateur historique? Parce que pour nous, le véritable blocage, c'est au niveau de la Sonatel. Parce qu'apparemment, il y a que le gouvernement donne son accord à travers les ministères, les universités sont pour, l'agence de la direction informatique de l'État est pour, mais l'opérateur historique qui a vraiment la plupart du trafic national du pays. Aujourd'hui, au Sénégal, nous avons un seul AS, donc tous nos préfixes nationaux sont annoncés par la Sonatel. Donc le cas du Sénégal est un peu particulier parce qu'on vit dans un pays de monopole. Et tant qu'on ne casse pas ce monopole-là, je ne vois pas où est-ce qu'on va aller avec toutes ces initiatives de points d'échange, de IPv6, de tout ce qu'on veut. Pour IPv6, c'est la même chose. On a un préfixe depuis 2006, mais ce n'est pas annoncé par la Sonatel. Donc, c'est toujours le même problème. On est toujours bloqué par ce monopole. Donc, si on peut faire quelque chose à aider pour casser ces monopoles-là qui existent dans certains pays, ça peut aider à déployer plus rapidement les points d'échange. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Kudia. That's a very good question with respect to Senegal. Definitely, the first approach will be to sensitize government to understand the benefits of a competitive environment. I think significantly that's something we need to aspire to do in terms of engaging more with government, both in our efforts through the Axis project, what AFRINIC is doing to ensure that the government is well aware with respect to what a competitive environment brings in terms of the benefits to the community. But we've had a lot of setbacks in Senegal, and in terms of the change of guard in Senegal at the ministry and regulatory levels, the senior management who make the decision. I think you go through one minister and one director general every other year. So we've restarted the efforts significant times. And I am not sure how to get a solution to that. The good thing is that the people below that do remain, but the efforts to get something actually done remains a challenge because you have change of leadership every now and then. So we haven't given up. We are still in making efforts to discuss that. I believe once you have multiple operators, and I think you have about 2 now, despite the fact they all have to get international connectivity through Sonatel. If we can have at least 3 operators, it will be possible to set up an exchange point, and they can start independent of Sonatel. And then in due course, as you attract more participants, more content into the exchange points, then you will find that even the incumbents will join the exchange point and peer with others. So it means that you need to have an environment where you have at least more than 3 operators independent, even if they're buying transit from one particular, from the incumbent in this particular case. So getting to that level in Senegal has been a challenge, but there's definitely ongoing engagement. We know the regulator has the right approach, but it's getting the other arms of government to understand that competitive environment and the value it brings to the economy. So we do have ongoing efforts, and I believe that should be, hopefully in the future, we should be able to resolve that. Any other questions? Any other comments from panelists?
I'm not exactly sure about the situation in Senegal, and having a monopoly is certainly not an advantage to make the end users experience better. But I believe there still are opportunities or possibilities to improve the customer's experience if the monopolist would actually host the cash servers themselves. I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily an internet exchange where a cash server of the big players is connected to. For example, Akamai has this ANP program where they can run Akamai cache servers within their network. And I just spoke the other day with some representative of Akamai, and obviously they overcome their internal legal issues now, so the ANP deployment in Africa should be fairly easy now. So this is what I heard. It's hearsay, but obviously there is also an improvement on that side.
Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to stop here for this particular session. Let's appreciate our very good panelists for their presentations. And I'd like to send you off for coffee break, and we shall resume at 4 o'clock with the next half of this interconnection and infrastructures discussion. And basically, the next half of this will be talking about interconnection. How do we fix the terrestrial part? We have 3 very good presentations. One on a recent study, and I have to emphasize this, a recent study that has actually identified a lot of the barriers that we have on internet access in Africa. Then we are going to hear the challenges that people are facing with respect to cross-border interconnection, and then the last presentation is what ISPs should be doing to improve their, to maximize their benefit and value in the services that they provide. So with that, I'll invite you for the coffee break, and I think we have some housekeeping from Babusha.